Alright guys, welcome back to part 2 of the Walnut and Hickory bench build. So we're going to start off with a very bad thing. My blade and my miter saw is super dull at that point in time, so don't do that in the future. But anyway, let's just get on with this project. So, if you haven't seen part 1 of this, it'll be up in the card, up on the top right there. So in the first part, we built the walnut base. In this part, we're going to be working with a whole bunch of 8-quarter hickory, going to get milled up and turning it into a nice, big, heavy slab for the bench top. By the way, this is what a nice, fresh, clean blade on the miter saw looks like. But anyway, one of the things you have to really watch for when you're working with hickory, especially this length and weight of hickory, is you got to take it nice and slow on all your tools. You can see I'm moving quite a bit slower on the jointer, the miter saw, the bandsaw, all these tools. You just got to move just a little bit slower than you would with other woods because hickory is just so dense. Another big consideration on this bench top here was laying out the wood for the best look and to make sure that it wouldn't cup in the future. So I went through twisting each board, making sure that my alignment was good, and from there I could start the insane amount of planing. I took all these from their normal 8-quarter thickness, pretty much down to just under 3/4 of an inch, all on the planer. As you can imagine, that made a lot of dust. Then from there, I could take them over to the table saw, cut them all to their final widths, and the widths do vary quite a bit per board, and I did that intentionally to keep as much width as I could to the bench top, but also to add this natural variation to it, just to make it a little bit more interesting. So once all the edges were fitting nicely together, I went back at it with that dowel jig with a 1/2-inch bit and started drilling the dowel holes. And luckily this time, I did not break a drill bit. So each joint is reinforced with 4 dowels. Now, this isn't so much for strength as it is for alignment. As much as possible, I wanted to be able to flatten this slab easily at the end, and my hopes were that I wouldn't have to do anything major to it, but that ended up not being true. So the dowels did a pretty good job of keeping it flat. I think it was more so the clamping pressure that moved them. So here I'm just going at this sheet of MDF, cutting off the nice square factory edges, reattaching them with some drywall screws to make a slab flattening mill. And so the idea here is that by using the MDF and those nice square factory edges reattached there, I'm going to have a perfectly flat reference surface and some nice perfectly square fences that my router jig can ride along. But here you can see just how big and heavy this slab actually is. And this is where it got fun. All I have is a little 1-horsepower Ryobi router, and my biggest bit is a 1/4 of an inch. So it took a lot of passes, a lot of time, but eventually I was able to get one side perfectly flat. And even though it looks like it's not flat, it actually is, according to putting a level and a ruler and all these other things on it. So once I had one side nice and flat, I could flip it over and make sure everything was still, referencing flat against the MDF, and go with the opposite side with the router. And so on this side I had to take off just a little bit more material because there was a little bit of cupping. It took about 2 hours, but the slab was nice and flat. Now, all those little small divots that you can see on there came out super quickly with the random orbit sander. I think I may have spent about an hour and a half sanding, and that actually would have been quite a bit shorter because on one side, I didn't realize I was using 100 grit sanding discs. So that's something you want to pay attention to. But anyway, after sanding, I noticed that I had some pretty good checks in one end in a couple of the boards. So I decided to try and learn another new skill, and that is adding bow ties. Now, I absolutely love the look of these things in other projects that people have done, so I took some of my spare walnut, cut out a few small bow ties. Now, there's 3 on the top that you're seeing me put in here, and then there's 3 along the bottom as well, which I didn't actually get any footage of for some reason. So the bow ties are probably my favorite part of doing this whole project because it's right at that point where I really can't afford to mess up on this bench top. So I took my time going at it nice and slow with the router, then fine-tuning everything with a chisel. Now my chisel work is much to be desired, but eventually I was able to get the bow ties to fit very, very nicely, and I didn't split the wood, which was kind of surprising. Them dry for a good day or two, and then cleaned them up with a flush trim saw. And well, then I got to use my very old, very poorly tuned and sharpened hand plane, which did a pretty good job. Got it to the point where it made it much easier to sand. And then I could cut the bench top to its final lengths, widths, and add a 30-degree bevel to the bottom. And so the very last thing I decided to do to the bench top was add a 1/8 round over to the top just to knock off those sharp corners. So make sure, if you guys are not subscribed already, make sure you hit that button because part 3, the finishing stage of this project, is going to be coming out very soon.